Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Talks hosted by the Collab Lab. This is testing components in React using Cypress with Shawn Harris. The Collab Lab is a volunteer-run nonprofit. We are free for the participants. And although we don't teach coding, we help our participants learn skills that are necessary in the real world. So what we do is we pair people up in groups of 4 and have them work on a project like building an app. They're supervised and assisted by real world developers so that they can learn things like pair programming, merging PRs, code reviews, just walking through your code. And we try to make this as real world as possible. If you'd like to know more about the program, please go to our website, thecollablab.codes. And with that, I am going to pass this on to Shawn. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tatiana. I'm going to do the Zoom song and dance here. And can everyone see my screen? Cool,
Yes.
cool, perfect. So, hey, everyone, I'm super excited to be here. My name is Shawn Harris, and I'm a Senior Technical Solutions at Cypress. And essentially what that means is that I get to help customers and our internal teams, really understand what our product is and how to best utilize it. And that could be including sessions for our customers to understand how to, again, best use our product, or it could be providing internal learning sessions. A little bit about me. I am a bootcamp grad. I attended in 2019, and I'm also a teaching assistant in my free time. I'm also a cancer survivor. I got to ring the bell in May of 2021, so I'm always super excited about that. And I am going to go ahead and make a few enemies to start off the day. So I am a tacos over pizza person. And don't get me wrong, pizza is delicious, but I mean, you really just can't go wrong with tacos. Also, I prefer dogs to cats. Don't get me wrong, I also like cats, but dogs just go along a little bit better with my active lifestyle. And to really just shake things up, I'm a morning person. And that is my favorite time of the day. And that's just because I like to have the afternoons free to myself to do, whatever I want to do and to be able to do cool meetups like this. And if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on all the platforms at Conversation, and I'm always happy to connect. Now that we've covered a bit about me, here's what we're going to cover today. So we are going to cover Cypress in a nutshell, which is essentially like an overview of Cypress. And then we're going to go into the different testing types in Cypress. We're going to cover a couple of those. And then we will walk through a demo of what testing the Create React app could look like. So Cypress in a nutshell, I know that some of you have already used Cypress, but I just want to just give a brief overview just in case anyone has not, and that way we're all on the same page. So what is Cypress? So if I had to put everything that I tried to understand what Cypress is in a single sentence, this is the sentence that I was able to come up with. So I have that Cypress is an open source automated testing framework that offers fast, reliable, and user-friendly solutions for end-to-end testing and web applications. Let me just minimize this. And to be honest, even though I work here, that's still quite a bit of a mouthful in my opinion. So I really want to just break this down, and that way we can get an understanding of what each of these sections means. So the first one being Cypress is open source. So that means that our software is available for anyone. So you don't have to work at Cypress in order to do a pull request or make a contribution to our main repo. And I always thought that that was a really cool thing. Next is automated testing. So I personally really enjoy automated testing, and it's not because I just work there, but it's because your other option is manual testing. Basically manual testing is you are personally going through and you are the person that is clicking and typing to just verify that your app works the way that you intend for it to work. And that definitely works for a lot of teams. But if I am writing the code and then I'm also having to manually test the code, I personally think that you benefit from having those tests to be automated. Next is literally the reason why I actually got into learning Cypress, and that's because Cypress is super fast and it's super easy to use. So if you need to click something or if you need to type something in your application, Cypress literally has commands that is like, it's called click and it's for clicking, or you have dot type, or you can use like enter or things like that. And to me, that just made it really easy for me to learn especially when I was first getting into the web dev space. And this means that your tests are going to match the way that your users test. So when your user is having to go in and click something, your test is emulating that exact same behavior. And so you're more likely to understand whether it's working as intended for the user and not just on your own personal machine. So we have end-to-end testing here, but we actually have that more in depth in the next section. So I'm going to come back to that one. But before we move on to the next section, I just wanted to really point out that Cypress runs in the browser. So if you're familiar with using like Jest or something like that, that runs in the DOM, again, it's great for finding that data, but you don't really get a visualization of what you're actually testing. And for some developers, myself included, that is something that I really enjoy seeing, especially because sometimes the way that you think that it's working, when you look at it visually, it just comes out just a tad bit different. So I do like to see exactly what I'm looking at. And so I'd like to talk about what end-to-end testing is and what that would look like if you were testing with Netflix. So if you're not familiar with Netflix, Netflix is a streaming service that has a plethora of like movies and documentaries, TV shows, things like that. And when you think about the process of like how you would navigate through Netflix, you think about logging in, you want to select your user profile, then you need to search through the endless supply of movies and TV shows, and then you actually need to click on that movie and then play that movie, right? And that is what is called the user flow. And that is essentially what your user is testing. So the beginning to the end, that is what an end-to-end test is. It is exactly what it says. So you are testing from one end to the other end. So if you had like a e-commerce app, you testing to see like, can I put something in the cart and can I check out the items in that cart? That is end-to-end testing. So what I did was I created a very, very, very basic Netflix app, and I set it up with end-to-end test. So we're going to take a look at that. So this is my Netflix app, and I do see there's a question in the chat. So I just wanted to say I most certainly save some time at the end for questions. However, there will be times throughout the through the session where there will be these kind of pauses where I am downloading something or something along those lines, and I'm more than happy to take a look at those questions then. If it is a 911 question, please feel free to just say, hey, I don't understand, and go ahead and come off mute. I'm totally cool with that. So this is my super basic app. This is not a real like authenticated app or anything. I just added a click event that basically says, as of right now, when we start the app, you have a home and a login page. And then you'll see that there's nothing else in this bar. And I can literally put anything in here. And when I click this login button, now it's going to provide me two different options. So I have, cartoons, the different TV shows. Then I have some movies that I love. And you'll see that my quote unquote name is over here that is available. And then if I need to, I can also log out, right? And so in order for me to feel like my app is successful, I need to be able to complete what's called a critical path. And I like to call the critical path the money path, because if that path doesn't work, then essentially your app doesn't work. And so in my app, you just saw me try to like log in and select the different movies or TV shows. So if that process doesn't work, then essentially my app doesn't work. And so what you just saw me do was to manually test it. So you saw me, quote unquote, authenticate it. You saw me check to see, are these movies available? Are the cartoons available? And to see my name and to log out. But that leaves a lot of room for error. If I forget something, and also it's a little bit harder when you are the person that is writing the code and also testing the code, because it tends to work for you when you're the one who wrote it, because you know exactly where to click and you know exactly what you're looking for. But if we were to do this in a, instead of doing it manually, if we were to do this in a automated fashion with Cypress, this is what that same test could look like. So I already have my app up and running, and I already have Cypress running. And so if I were to run the authentication portion of my test, as you can see, it ran fairly quickly. It logged into my app, it got the button, and it typed in my username and password, and then it verified that the log out button was there. And so this is something that is great because I don't have to wonder, oh, did I remember to check if something happened? And if we actually look at the code itself, you can see that what we're trying to do is verify that the user is logged in. So the first thing that we're doing is we are visiting our URL. And then just like you would when you're thinking about like that English like syntax where you're saying, I need to get this element and it should not exist. So first we're saying that the log out button, when we're first logging in, that button should not exist, right? And then now that we verified that that button should not exist, now we are typing in our username, our super secret password that we've got here, and then we are getting the login button and we are clicking that button. So again, if you need to type something, you use the .type command. If you need to click something, you're using the .click command. And then we are, now that we've clicked the button, now we are verifying that that log out button should exist. And so again, if we look at our actual test that ran here, you can see what happened before and after. So as you can see, if I were to click here, I can see exactly what happened. I was getting this password. And then if I'm typing, you see the before and the after. And this is part of that end-to-end flow because I'm verifying, does my authentication actually work, right? And if you can actually see right up here, this test only took about 4 seconds, but if I needed to manually verify this myself, I can type like pretty quickly, but I don't think I'd be able to get all this done in 4 seconds. So that's one of the things, like I said, Cypress is super fast, super easy to use. It's almost as if, you're typing how you're writing. So you're saying, get this element, click this element, type into this element. And I thought that that was a really cool concept. So going back to our cards here, verifying, I just want to say, like, verifying that your app works as a cohesive whole, or verifying that it works from beginning to end, that's always something that you want to do because that is literally your critical path. But it's not the only way to test your app. And so if we look at this picture here, this is just a generic Netflix home screen. And so at the bottom here, you can see a bunch of different media cards, right? So you can see that, you have some documentaries here. You have some TV shows, maybe a video of some kind. And these are great. I mean, it looks to be working right now, but this is one of those things where if you logged into this app and you saw that one of these images was missing, or you couldn't see a title of some kind, you would think that that app is broken. And to just test these sections down here, which we'll call components, that is where component testing really can really shine. And so to just kind of like give a broad overview, a component just very simply said, is a bit of it's a bit of reusable code that allows you to create or update your code base very quickly. So imagine if you were creating that Netflix app, that initial setup of creating those components, those media cards that you have, if you had to type out every single one of those cards, that would be very tedious, and it leaves a lot of room for error. And then once you create it all, as you know, Netflix updates their content pretty frequently. So if you needed to update that content or update one of those cards the way that it looks, you'd have to go in and change every single card. So for those of you that have been on Netflix for a long time, the option to rate your card, option to rate your selection has been there for quite some time, but the option to add it to my list is a newer option. And so if this would not have been a component, then they would have had to have gone in and literally edited every single one of these cards to update it to add this, add to my list option. So I also want to point out that just because it is a Netflix component that has one of these media options, they're not all the same. And so if you look at this one in particular, so every card tends to have the title that we have here, and it tends to have a description. But this one that we're looking at in particular is actually a series. And so you're going to see that this one has seasons. You have the option to navigate through the different seasons, and you actually have the option to also see different episodes within that season. But if this were a movie, you're not going to see this seasons option because it's not a movie. It doesn't have different seasons within that movie. You're not going to have the option to navigate through those different seasons. And instead of seeing different episodes here, you might see like prequels or sequels, or you might see things that are related or similar to that movie. And so again, that is where component testing really, really shines. So if we actually head back to our demo that we created, so we actually have two categories, right? So we have our movies category here, that each one of these has a picture, it has a title, and then it has a description of that title. And if we look at the cartoons also have an image. It also has a title and a description, but you'll notice that it also has the number of seasons that was the total amount of seasons within each of these cartoon TV series, right? And so in our situation, the goal here is not necessarily to test to see, hey, is this a Avatar: The Last Airbender card? It's more so to test, am I getting the data that I expect to get if it is a cartoon versus if it is a movie? So two things that, if we look at the code here, two things I want to note is that this example is the first one that we were looking at. This was our end-to-end test. And if we look at the location of this test, remember this one is going through the user flow. So testing if our authentication works. And it is located within our Cypress folder. So if I actually close a few of these, you'll see that we have our Cypress folder. And then we have another folder inside called E to E. And then that spec is inside this E to E folder. But for components, you really want your components to live in the same space, your tests and your components themselves to live in that same space. And that's just because you want to have access to it, and you want it to be much easier to be able to debug. So as you can see, I have movies. So I have my movie component, I have my movie list component, and then I have my movie Cypress test. And I know that this is a Cypress test because all of my other tests, all of my other files end in .js, whereas this one ends in .sci.js. And this is just a great way of being able to differentiate if you have like just tests and you have Cypress tests. The naming convention is a great way to be able to see that. And so the second thing that I wanted to kind of point out is if we actually, let's move this one over here and close this. So if we look at this, our original test that we looked at with the authentication, this one uses sci.visit, and we are visiting our local host URL. But with a component, you don't need to necessarily visit a URL. Instead, you're going to import React. You're going to import your component and just make sure that your paths are correct. And then you're going to actually use a command called sci.mount instead of sci.visit. And this is going to allow you to mount your component just as you would in your React app to be able to see that component in itself. So without really getting into the weeds too much, my app, the state for my app is actually in my app.js file. So everything renders in my app.js. And so because of that, even though I have a list of movies and I have an individual movie component, the scope is the scope for getting the data for that list of movies or that list of cartoons is not available to me. So if we make this bigger again, if we notice, I've mounted my component, but I've also provided data in here that I would need for my test. So I've said, hey, I'm going to provide an ID, I'm going to provide the title, I'm going to provide the poster, and I provided the path for that poster, and then I've given a description. And so if we were to actually run this test, here we go. So right now, again, we are in our authentication, so our auth.sci.js. So we actually have to navigate from our end-to-end to our component test. So if I were to run this movies spec, we would see that we would see, instead of seeing an array or an array of objects of the different components that I had, that list of movies, we're just seeing one individual component with the data that I have provided to it. And so if we take a look at our example here, so first we're saying mount this movie, and we expect to see a image, which is here. We expect to see a title, which is a H3 tag in our case. We expect to see a description, which in our case is a paragraph tag. And then we do not expect to see a H2 tag, because in my app, H2 tags are reserved for seasons. And since this is a movie, this should not be available to me. And if we take a look back at our code itself, we can see that we've got some comments here that basically says the goal of the test is, it is a movie component and not a cartoon TV series. So we've mounted our component, we've provided our data to our component, and then we've got our comments here saying that we should have all the necessary parts that make it a movie component. And then we should verify that it does not have the sections that would not make it a movie component. So in our case, it would be the season, so that H2 component. And so that being said, I also want to say that this is also a great time to kind of point out that there are other use cases for testing the component. So in our case, again, here we've provided the title and the poster and the description. But if we actually remove this, so let's remove that it only, and we'll put it down here instead. We actually have the option to test whether we have alt text. And alt text is really important because accessibility, or A11 as it's also commonly called, for some developers, it is not something that is in the forefront of their mind. But I do kind of want to point out that, accessibility is one of those things where if you need to be able to see that description, not having that there for you it's really it's really disastrous to your experience when you're visiting a site. So I also think that when you're testing components, that is a great time to test to see what type of alt text that you have within that component as well. So if we were to run this one, this one is different because I have provided the data, but instead of providing a actual path for my poster, I've just provided an empty string, and I've also provided some alt text where the poster would have been. So if we run that in our Cypress app, as you can see now, it's different. Instead of having that image there, we have our alt text here. And it's not just any alt text, right? Like I could certainly just say, hey, the picture's missing. It was a picture of the Lion King. And I mean, technically that is correct. But again, you know, not the use case for having alt text isn't always that the picture is just missing. Sometimes somebody might need a screen reader or something like that, in which case you want to really provide to them a description, not too much of a description, but enough for them to get a full understanding of what that image was. So if I would have just said the Lion King, their thought might be that it is just a picture of Simba, when in all actuality, the picture is a picture of Simba, Nala, Rafiki, Timon, and Pumbaa all standing on Pride Rock overlooking the Pride Lands. And that gives you a much broader description, a much greater description of what you're actually expected to see in that image. And it also, it's you know, again, like you just want to take the other user's experience. It's like, if just because it works for you doesn't mean that it works for everybody else. So I always like to just, you know, just throw that in there a little bit. So now I know that we have been, I've been talking for quite a bit, and you know, I've provided quite a bit of information. So now we're going to do a fresh install, and we're going to do a code along here. So to get started, we are going to run npx create React app, and we're going to call our app my app. npx create React app is just going to install all the folder structure that I need to create my React app. And we're using create React app and not React.js. And then I'm calling it my app. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but for my example, I'm just going to call it my app. And then we're going to change directory or CD into that app. So let's actually take a look at our terminal here. And we are going to run npx create React app. And again, we're just going to call this my app. And while this is downloading, I see I have a couple of questions in here. Is there a repo for this demo? I can absolutely put this repo in there. I can provide it to Tatiana and drop that in there for you guys. Happy to do that for you. I will say that I always like to put comments in my code, especially when I use pictures that aren't mine and things like that. And it's not because, you know, I think that I'll get in trouble or anything like that or whatever. I just really want to give whoever created that art and just kind of give them their props, or whoever's website I got it from, and just say like, hey, just letting you know, like, this was not my image. I didn't draw this. You know, this was from somebody else. And so you might see a couple of comments like that in my code. But I do not see any other questions in here. Let's see. Is it easy to test components from Chakra UI? I'm not as familiar with Chakra UI, but I think that that's a great question. I definitely need a little time to look into that. But Meek, if you would please just connect with me on LinkedIn or on not sure what it's called today, Twitter, X, whichever one it is. And I'm more than happy to look into it, and we can talk more about it. And you know, we can figure it out together. I'm down to do that. I'm more of a material UI person, but I don't see why it wouldn't, but you know, always happy to look into it. I don't want to just say yes, it works, and you know, I don't know for sure. Yeah, so now that our React app has it fully installed, it tells us what we can what our next steps are. So it's telling us to CD or change directory into our app, and then if we were going to start our app, we would run npm start. We're not going to start it just yet because we have a little bit more to do, but we are going to go ahead and CD into our app. And so now we are going to go ahead and install Cypress. So With Cypress, as long as you have a package JSON, you can just run npm install Cypress. If you don't have a package JSON, you would just run npm init, and then you would run install Cypress. I personally am a fan of npm init -y because I don't have to push enter 5 million times. I just learned about that, so I just wanted to make sure I spread the knowledge. And then we are going to open our app. So you guys are going to get to see the full installation of a Cypress app. So let's go back to our terminal here, and we're going to run npm install Cypress. And this is just going to install the latest published image of the Cypress binary. I think right now we're on like 12.17. And so that is already installed. That was fairly quick. And then we are just going to run npx Cypress open. Now, I do know that I have one that is running already. So let's close a few of these out so that we don't have too many open at one time. I don't want my computer to explode. This is the Netflix one, so we'll just go ahead and close that one, and we'll just leave this one. As you can see, we have two options here. We have, this is when you hit, when you run your command npx Cypress open, this is the Cypress app, the graphical user interface, or the GUI. And this is the first thing that you're going to see. So you have the option to choose end-to-end testing, or you have the option to choose component testing. Since we're doing component testing today, we're going to go ahead and configure our component test. And we have a create React app that has already been detected. If we were using something else like Angular or something like that, it would say that, hey, these other frameworks have been detected, but we're using Create React app. So we're going to go ahead and click next step. And Cypress is just confirming that we already have all the necessary dependencies installed. If you were missing the dependencies, it would actually give you a prompt, and it would say, hey, you're missing these dependencies, run this npm install command. But since we already have those, we're going to go ahead and click continue one more time. And then Cypress is going to provide us with all the necessary configuration files. So just like when we ran our npx create React app, and it provided us a source folder and a public folder and all that stuff, Cypress is essentially doing the same thing when you run your npx Cypress open command. It's going to provide you with your Cypress configuration. It's also going to provide your support folders for whichever one you're doing. So in this case, we're doing component testing. So it's provided us with a components support file, and then also the command and the component.js. And then it's also going to provide the examples fixture. If we were to create a scaffold the example specs, this is where this would come in handy. So we're going to go ahead and click continue. And now we have our Cypress fully initialized. And the cool thing about Cypress is that even if I didn't, even if I had only like just gotten this computer and I didn't really have any other browsers installed, you can actually run Cypress on Electron, because all Cypress versions come with Electron bundled with it. I just happen to already have like Edge and Chrome and Firefox installed on my computer. And that's why these other options are available. But if you don't have them, or you're using something like a virtual machine where those don't already have it, these other browsers installed, you can always still run Cypress just using Electron. I'm just going to use Chrome because I tend to typically use Chrome, and we're just going to go ahead and start running our component test. So since we just created this app, this one does not have any tests for us to actually test yet. We just created our app and we don't have any tests in here at all. So we can actually create a test from a component. So if we select here and we just go to our app.js and click on our app, Cypress is going to go ahead and import React for you. It is going to import the function that you selected. So in this case, it happens to be the app. And then it's going to mount that component for you. So when we run this spec, because we're running the entire app.js, which is just a singular component, if we were to run the npm start command, this is exactly what we would see. And it's not to say that, I know that when you look at it, it might look like, well, Shawn, it looks like you just visited, your local host website or something like that. But that is not exactly the case here. So if we take a look at our code here, and I actually should have, let me actually open up a code editor for that first. And then we'll get our Cypress back up and running. So if we look at our code editor here, one of the things that we can see is that in our source code, we have our app.js, and everything is rendered within our app.js. So this is just a singular component here that we're rendering. And so to kind of go back to our component testing, to kind of prove this point here, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a component from scratch. And then we'll render that component. So as you can see right now, we just have our app.sci.js. This is the one that we just created about a minute ago. It's telling you about a minute ago. So what we're going to do is at our source folder, we're just going to create a new component, and we're just going to call it fun.js. And in this component, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import React from React. And we are also going to create our functions. So we're going to const, and just notice that our functions are all capitalized. So we're going to have const the name of our function, which in our case is fun, equals, if I had any parameters to pass in, I could pass those in now, or if I had any props or anything, I could pass those in now. And then we're going to give a fat arrow, a nice curly boy right here. And then we are going to return a div. And inside this div, we are just going to have just a h1 tag with fun written inside. And so now we have our create React app component. And theoretically, if we go to new spec, we should be able to create a new spec from here, kind of like how we have app and we have this right here. But if you notice, when I go to fun.js, it says no components found. And that's because I did not export default my component. So if I can spell. So we're going to, sorry, got a little freeze happening here. All right, so we got export default fun. And now if I close this and I go back, when I go to fun, I should see the fun component that I just created. And Cypress is going to do the same thing. It's going to import React for you. It's going to import your new function that you just created called fun. And it's going to render render that component by mounting that component called fun. So now, if we look at here, the only thing that we have is an h1 tag that says fun in it. And we can see that that is now rendering. So instead of it rendering the entire app, it is rendering just that singular component. And, you know, maybe you need to do something like change the color of it. So we can import our index.css. And in here, let's just create a class, and we will call it fun class. And then we will go to our index.css. And at the bottom here, we will just add fun class, and we will make that red. So now if we look, our H1 has gone from black to red. And that's the really cool thing about it. And I just kind of really want to point out, so when we did our original test, our end-to-end test, that one was about 4 seconds. For us to mount this component, it only took 44 milliseconds. Now, again, I know I'm fast, but I'm not that fast. So component tests are actually even faster than your end-to-end testing. And that's because you don't need to worry about, you know, running a server or anything like that. You can actually just pass in those props like I did in the original one and just provide that data to it. And when I say you can just pass those props in, so if we go back here and we put in our props, and then we just add, let's just add a paragraph here. And inside of here, we will add some more curly boys. I'm gonna do props dot, we'll call this props value. And now if we were to go to our components, we can actually pass in here. Let's see. Props value equals hello Mark. And I'm just picking on Mark because I have the joyous task of working with Mark. So we're just going to pass that in. And now if we go and look, now we can see that we have been able to pass in, those props directly to our app. So that was what I really wanted to kind of showcase, like when you're having components, how you can like isolate exactly what you need and just test just that one section. And so if we actually go back to our example here, I just want to point out that you have end-to-end testing, and we also covered component testing today. And one of the things that I think is important to point out is that when do you know to like how to use each one? So you want to use end-to-end testing when you are testing your user journey. So ideally, you know, again, if you have an e-commerce app, you know, and you need to add something to the cart, you want to test to see like, you know, does this work the way that I expect for it to work in the eyes of the user? Also, you're matching that user experience. So if you click on a text input, should the user also be able to click on that text input? Same thing if a user is supposed to type something with end-to-end testing, you should also be able to test that as well. And then again, you are just verifying running from the beginning of your test all the way to the end of your test. So if your application under test requires authentication, and then you need to add a couple things to your cart, and then you need to check out of that cart, you would want to test that entire critical path, or the path that is going to get you from the beginning to the end. And then with component testing, you'll want to test those in isolation. So how we just verified, you know, is this fun component working? Or when we were looking at our fake Netflix app, you know, is the app rendering, is the movie rendering the way that we expect? Are we verifying that it does not have seasons because it's a movie component, versus if it is a TV component, it should have those seasons in there. And then also for UI interactions, I personally am a huge fan of dark theme. And so it is not uncommon for me to have an app. Honestly, if I would have had a little bit more time, I probably would have had a toggle on there that's toggled between like light and dark theme. And that, again, component testing is a great time to test to see if that works. You wouldn't necessarily want to go through end-to-end testing to just see if the dark theme works, when you can just test just a component by itself. And then it's really going to help you right as you're developing that component. So I don't know about you all, but I have certainly written an entire project, and I get to the end and I realize it is not working the way that I expected it to work. And I found out that it was something that I introduced quite a while back, and I end up having to go back and refactor all of my code, and that's really, you know, tedious and time consuming. But had I tested my component earlier on, then I wouldn't have built other components that weren't working as I expected, on top of that already essentially broken component. And so before we hop into the official Q&A, I also want to point out that today we talked about the Cypress app, which is the one that is down here. And this is the one that you run locally on your computer, completely free, open source or whatever. But we also have our Cypress Cloud offering. So if you're looking for, like maybe you're looking for historical data, like, okay, this test passed today, but did it pass last week? We also have our Cypress Cloud, and we do have a free tier that allows you to still be able to test I found it very beneficial when I was looking for a new role to be able to say, hey, here's my app, and here's the test that I wrote for my app, and here's my testing history for that app. And again, you do have a free tier that is available on that as well. That was all that I had today. So I just wanted to see, were there any questions, comments, concerns? Hopefully no concerns.
Shawn, you mentioned that it's probably best practice to write the tests as you're going through your app, as you're building your app. Would you say do it literally as soon as you finish each component, or like maybe have like 2 or 3 of them ready, go back and like test a few things? What's your experience?
I personally am a test as I go type of person, and that is because of what I experienced. Like I said, getting what I thought was MVP, and then realizing that I was about 3 or 4 steps down from where I wanted to be, and having to essentially feel like I was starting over to get the correct data that I wanted. I personally prefer to kind of like create a component, test that component, and then I will merge it. And I also create separate branches when I'm testing these components, because there's nothing worse than getting to a point where you don't even know where you've broken your code, and you can always go back and create a new branch, or pull like a previous branch or whatever. So I'm certainly a fan of it's called shifting left, and it's where basically instead of creating your entire project and then testing, essentially you're creating your component and then you're testing your component.
Thank you. And good point about creating separate branches. Just as a fair
Absolutely. If I can save anybody the pain that I went through, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. Any other questions?
I just had a quick question. I wanted to see how you passed your prop in the Cypress test. That's all.
Sure. So in this example, wait, let me see, wrong one. In this one, essentially what I did was in my, so I have my component itself, where I passed in props up here as a parameter. And then I used my curly boys to pass in and get the props object and say, hey, I'm going to get the props value. And we're going to put whatever this props value is, and it's going to display in this paragraph tag. And then in my Cypress test, I manually provided this. So this, I provided hello Mark, but this might be something where if your app is using like an API call where you're calling to somebody else's app, whether it's, again, it could be Netflix, or, it could be Google or whoever, you might be passing in that prop here. So to be able to verify that you're getting that correct data back. You actually have a couple of options. You can kind of like hard code it here. Another option that you could do is in Cypress, you actually have what's called a fixtures folder. And so here you have like examples where you have like examples JSON, and actually I have some in my original project. So I have, this is my my movies one, and in my public folder I have the data that I need. So I have my cartoons JSON and my movies JSON. But if I want Cypress to get that information without me having to pass it in, what I could do is I could provide that information in a fixtures folder. And so in my movie, as you can see, I'm giving it all this information. So I'm saying ID, title, and all this other stuff. But what I could do is I could actually just, this is one that I actually had commented out, but I could actually say, hey, go to my fixture folder, get this this movies JSON that we have here in our fixtures folder, and I am storing it as a variable, and then that allows me to just get the index that I wanted. And so now I'm able to just call my movie as a prop and pass that in instead of having to specifically hard code my data here. Or again, it could be an API call.
Awesome. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, going chicken soup with rice. Cool, cool.
The thing
So
Sorry, my
No, go
last
ahead.
question. I asked the question
Sure.
about Chakra UI because like I use Chakra a lot, so I just
Mhm.
want to know like how easy. I'm sure it's probably like similar, and I know Chakra does have some component stuff, and they eventually get turned into normal
I actually
HTML.
do in the chat. I actually do have one of my colleagues. Mark, are you familiar with Chakra UI? Have you heard any use cases on that one?
Yeah, I haven't used it myself, but I see like here's an example. One of the challenges with component tests initially is always if there's a third-party library like that involved, it has its own styles that are coming from somewhere, and often they might be pulled in globally in your app or in your like root file. And those wouldn't be present by default out of the box in a component spec because we're not rendering with your other existing imports that your app does like higher up in the component tree. However, I did find like, yeah, just Googled it quickly when you mentioned it earlier, a little Stack Overflow question about how to do Chakra, like solve that problem. And that's a clue to me that people are successfully testing components that use Chakra UI, and they have to do this little bit of wrapping with Chakra provider in order to get it to work.
Nice.
Actually, I'm gonna double check. I have a feeling I may have a very concrete example just by coincidence. I'll put it in the chat if I do in a second.
Okay, cool. Yeah, as you can see, this is one of the reasons why I enjoy working with Mark, because he's very familiar and is always willing to share his knowledge when he knows, and if he doesn't know, he'll be like, I don't know, let's figure it out together. So Mark is a great human being. While Mark is looking for that example, were there any other questions? Alrighty. So what we can do is if Mark is able to find that example, I actually wanted to just kind of point out that I'm super excited for everybody that joined today. I cannot thank you all enough for coming. I was like over the moon and elated to be here. And so like if you want to learn more about Cypress, the cool thing about it is that we have like a huge community, and everybody is always happy and wanting to learn. So the first thing is that if you're interested in you want to have like some more projects other than the one that we're going to send to you, we have learn.cypress, and that's where you can go and learn a lot of like how to get started with Cypress, how to best practices, and how to get started with the Cypress cloud as well, and that's completely free. And then we also have our Discord, where that is, we have over 10,000 members in our Discord. We have ambassadors in there, sometimes employees are in there. And you can literally just go in and just ask, questions. And a lot of times people will come in and just say, oh, here's an example, or they'll ask you for your code and, they'll kind of work with you around it. And then if you would like to go to any Cypress community events, we do hold monthly events where you can just go in and watch different aspects of whether it's our Cypress cloud or our Cypress app, and different developers come on and show different aspects of our app altogether. And I just want to say that I did create a PDF that has some of the resources that we talked about here today. So it includes all of these resources, and also includes the Cypress, the regular docs that we have, and then it also has the Create React app docs, and we will get that out to you. And I can also put in the GitHub repo as well. So that being said, thank you. I really appreciate all of you and all of your time. And like I said, if you want to connect, you can find me at Conversation on almost every platform.
Shawn, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for your time. The recording of this talk will be posted on our website and on YouTube tomorrow. And I'm happy to send out an email to all the participants with the resources Shawn mentioned, as well as the GitHub repo. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Shawn.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.